Hi, everyone. Welcome to the new Senseability newsletter edition. This month, we are focusing on the subject of high performance, overcoming challenges, and helping from the perspective of a Feldenkrais practitioner. How do we help people that are high performing or elite athletes get better at the sports that they want to get better at? So I'm going to introduce my colleague Rich, who has come on graciously agreed to speak with us about the subject. He has a long history, a long background working with high performance and elite athletes, and that started off with an Olympic athlete who was a diver of the USA team, and then he went on to coach a basketball team at ASU, Arizona State University. Is that correct, Rich?
That's correct. Yeah.
And you've worked individually with many different athletes over the course of your Feldenkrais career. So I was particularly keen on talking to you about this subject because I think that you have a lot to offer in terms of helping people understand that a slow moving movement practice can be useful to people that are performing at high levels at high intensity. So that just as the basis of kind of what we want to talk about today. So thanks so much, Rich, for agreeing to talk to us. And I look forward to our conversation. And if you want to add anything to what I've said already, that would be great.
Yeah. So I would say that I've worked with, a huge variety of elite athletes and what we call in the United States weekend warriors, where they just go out and do events during the weekend. It really doesn't make a difference. I mean, as long as you're engaged in the process of improving, then you're going to benefit by the Feldenkrais method. So yeah, that's the only thing I would add to that.
Okay, so let's maybe just go straight to that question then, in terms of how you see the Feldenkrais method being useful, considering that the way that it's practiced is quite slow and conscious, to someone that is interested in speed or power, or like elevating their speed or power within their chosen field, and how you see the Feldenkrais method being relevant to a high performing athlete.
Yeah. So it like a 50,000 foot level looking down, one of the things as far as the principle of no principles that we have in the Feldenkrais method, right, is that we go and meet our clients / students where they are. We don't require them to come to understand what the Feldenkrais method is about. And I think first off, for practitioners and for students, the practitioner should meet you where you're trying to perform, where you're trying to improve. And so I think a really great example of that is that for 3 summers, I worked with the Arizona State football team. I had about 40 of those young men in a room doing ATM, awareness through movement. And these are very big, energetic young men who have just gotten to the university or involved in trying to get to the National Football League. And they don't want to do the hand lesson. They don't want to do the bell lesson. That you're not going to, you need to be able to grab and hold the client metaphorically in a way that gains their interest. So that's meeting them where they are. So doing the bell lessons, they're not going to be interested in that. So you have to do something that's energetic. You have to, and then you slowly bring them back to sensing themselves. So really, and this is what I did, is I did something very simple, but not so simple, And we've done many times and Moshe's done on many of his lessons, his recorded lessons, of tilting the legs, lying on your stomach, right? And it gets larger and larger and faster. And so they all of a sudden they're doing that and they're really engaged and they really like how they feel later. And then I said, well, if you really like that, let's learn how that happened. And now I have them, right? So the next time I do it, but I don't have to do it quite as energetic. And slowly I move them to where they did do in those classes, they did do the bell hand, right?
And so what's the benefit? So, obviously I see the process where it's like you're moving from something that's more similar to what they are used to, like a bigger movement that's more like their existing training movements or conditioning movements.
Right.
What's the benefit of bringing them into sensation, like bringing them to the point of paying attention to themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to honor the fact that they've gotten pretty good at what they're doing without you.
Yeah.
So to come in and say, hey, you know what? Whatever you're doing, there's another way that's a heck of a lot better. That's pretty arrogant. And I don't think it's the best approach. They're very, very good.
They're skilled already. Yeah.
They're very skilled, right? And can they get better? Of course, we all can get better. But to come in with this bravado of thinking that, well, you have something so much better, it won't do you any good. You're gonna create them to feel defensive, and they're not going to be able to listen to what you have to offer. So you have to open up the door so they can have an experience internally, because the Feldenkrais method in and of itself is an internal, individualistic experience of yourself.
Yeah.
So you can notice the changes. And that's really important, because you can talk to the cows come home about how great things are, but until somebody has an experience of that, it doesn't really mean much.
Yeah. So within that context again, so you're providing that experience for those young athletes,
right?
What are you trying to help them, to add to their existing what's the quality that the Feldenkrais method brings to someone that is already a skillful or a high performer or fast or strong? What's the quality that it adds that provides value to them,
Right. So you ask them, what is it that you need to improve on? What is it that you want to get better at? What are your coach? I mean, I'm working with an equestrian right now who's trying to become a national champion. She's done very, very well. Since she's been seeing me, and she's continuing to improve. And one of the things I said to her was, she knows what she wants to improve on, but I asked her to ask her trainers, where are your blind spots? Where do they say you need to improve? And then have a give and take with your student client. Right. So you say, well, what is it that you want to improve on? Well, how do you notice that you're not doing that? What is it ever that they're saying to you that, you can't get across to whatever it is that you're doing? I mean, one of the things at Arizona State University, I worked with a lot of the student athletes, and one of the things I said that I could do to help the coach make that decision was that they try and teach a player how to do something, right? And in the Feldenkrais method, we know that there's an unlimited number of ways of coordinating things, putting things together to get across what you want to do. They have an idea, though. Those coaches have an idea of what they want to see. Yeah. And if they're having difficulty, it isn't because that player isn't trying to do what they're asking them to do. It's because he or she can't feel how to do it. And what I said to the coaches and head coaches and head trainers and all is that I can help them feel how they can do that of what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
And those people really like that idea. And so do the athletes who hear that, because then all of a sudden they go, instead of just trying harder, they have another place to learn how to do it instead of just using more effort.
And so you say they get on board with that idea. I can imagine it's quite a paradigm shift from what they're used to in some way. You know, it's not necessarily something that is part of their existing understanding. They've maybe learned how to try harder and, you know, like push for optimum performance. But what you're saying is that you're asking them to feel and to sense themselves more in some way. Or
yeah, well, I ask a simple question, and it's really it's a conundrum for them, because I already know the answer, right? And if they're honest, it's really an interesting moment when I ask this question, because it's going to be a way for me to understand whether or not that student or client is going to be forthcoming and genuine and honest with me, or they're still back and hesitant and everything else. And sometime during the conversations, I'll say something like, whenever you've done your particular event, a pitcher, a batter, a receiver in a football team, quarterback, golfer, tennis player, you know, whatever it is, track and field. Whenever you've done that really, really well, has it felt like effort?
Okay.
And everybody who's honest always answers the exact same way.
Okay.
They say no. I said, so then why do you value effort? You know, why do you value this idea of effort when you're trying to do something? Isn't it better to understand how you do it so you can do it more effortlessly?
Right. Yeah.
And then they go, and then you have this door opens again, right? So you're going to have to open many doors for them to peek into this idea of how the Feldenkrais method can help them. So you open one door, they peek in, and they say, well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And you have another one, and then, you know, and then until finally they have this internal experience that, you know, and one of the other things that I say, especially if I have a professional player who's coming to see me, is, and I say it to a lot, but especially a professional player, because they have, you know, non-disclosure agreements and all these other things that sometimes come into play, is I said, I'll work with you on one condition. And they'll go, what? I said, you be honest with your experience. If you think that you have to prove something or it has to be a certain way, I said, then not really a benefit to either one of us to work together, because you're trying to be something that's maybe not happening. Whereas if you're going to be honest with that and follow that, then I'm down with it and I'll help you any way I can. But if you're not, it doesn't really work.
So in that example, you've kind of like taken them through a process, and you've highlighted maybe some aspect that they feel that they're struggling with, or some weakness they have in their technique or their performance, or even, as you said, something that their coaches have fed back to them, like, you need to improve this skill. Could you, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about how Feldenkrais can help someone find effortlessness. Can you perhaps kind of go into that in a bit more detail to kind of like show people or tell people, like, what is it about the Feldenkrais method that allows for the development of effortlessness?
Well, I think this is your question, and so if it's not, just interrupt me so I understand. I think what you're asking is, when the client is in your office, or the athlete is in your office, what is it about the effortlessness that has value to them? Is that correct?
No, I think actually, because I think you kind of described how they could feel that when they were performing something at their best, there was that quality of effortlessness. So to me, it made sense, at least, that they would then be on board with the process. What I'm asking is like, how does the Feldenkrais method help someone find that quality of effortlessness?
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. Okay, so when we work really well, everything works harmoniously throughout ourselves. Our intention, our thought, our emotions, and our movement, right? It's, in the awareness through movement, Moshe talks about that. When something is not congruent, we get in our own way. We create effort that, I like to use the metaphor, the unstoppable force against the immovable object. And then all of a sudden we're not doing what we want. The Feldenkrais method allows people to feel where they create that effort that's not allowing them to do what they want to do.
Okay.
And then from there, they're able to have a choice of how to do it. Right now, they don't have that choice. And the more they get clear on how they create that pattern of how they do things, the easier it becomes for them then to change it. But as Moshe said, if you don't know what you're doing, of course, you can't do what you want. You can only do what you do. Right?
Yeah. So within that, what I'm hearing is that, self-awareness is really a kind of fundamental aspect, and it's through that self-awareness that you start to feel when you're perhaps using yourself in a way that isn't getting you where you would like to be. I'm rephrasing what you said. It doesn't really matter.
Yes. As in the Feldenkrais world, I mean, it's like yes and.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
Right. So yes, and the fact that you in the back of your mind that they have a lot of that already, or they wouldn't be at your office, right? If they didn't have that already, then they wouldn't have gotten as far as they've gotten, right? So they're very good at that
process. Like, right. I understand. Yeah.
I'm working now with somebody in the NFL, and at first we honed in and what I say to them is, I want to be your last teacher. I mean, that's what I'm working myself out of a job. So you understand yourself so well that you can make these adjustments all by yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You don't need me anymore. Now that's not to say that they don't still come in, but they really don't. And the greater amount of self-knowledge that you help them develop, the greater asset you are to them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think you're saying. I think that's the last step.
Yeah. Great. So that leads me on to, we had a couple of talking points, and one of those being injury. And obviously people that are, engaged in performance at a high level or any kind of sport, when they're using their body in a kind of extreme way or a strong way, can experience injury, and not just injury in one moment. They can repetitive injury, or persistent issues where they don't feel one part of themselves coming along with the rest of their experience. One way of saying it. So I'm kind of interested to hear, because you've talked a little bit about the sort of the overall process of someone getting to know themselves. How does that relate to how injuries, or how people can experience injuries, and perhaps how the Feldenkrais method can help them overcome or recover from injury?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit broader question too, because if you're working within especially with professional athletes, if you're working within that umbrella,
yeah,
you're going to be working within this idea of coaches and trainers. And so you're going to have to understand that how they are. So you have people talking in one of their ears already, right? And
right.
so they're saying, well, do this, do that, do this, do that, and you'll get better. And by the way, that's worked. I mean, I worked with an NFL quarterback, and that's worked for them.
Yeah.
Right. So, now it's not.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So you have to kind of respect, first of all, that they have somebody in one ear, and they have a lot of people trying to get into their other ear. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how you introduce this next part is threading the needle, because you don't want to say what they're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to say something that Russell Delman, who is one of my mentors, said, another way. There's another way maybe that might be of use to you, might help you improve. What about the possibility of this? So I think you need to first say that you're introducing another way, another possibility in the way that they go approach how they recover from an injury. I think that's really first thing that they need to understand. You're not trying to take away, that security blanket, right? It's like they need that.
Yeah.
And you're introducing, well, here's something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one of the talking parts we talked about was I'll say it differently, how they warm up to perform. And I'll go through that routine with them.
Sure.
And during our work, I'll start taking things to the idea of changing how they get themselves ready to perform, changing the routine, the pattern of how they get themselves ready. So they can feel themselves in a way that they know that they're ready. Right. And that includes many different strategies, but one of which is doing small ATMs, 5 or 10 minutes, and then doing some more active stuff, coming back and doing stuff. So it matters upon what they're doing. But all right, so that's one thing. The second thing is that I'm going to introduce something to the effect of, instead of stretching, let's see what this feels like to you. Are you more able to do what you want to do if you take that segment out and put in this?
Okay. And
do you feel better?
Yeah.
And then what do you do with that? Well, my coach is telling me this. You have to. It's a dynamic relationship, so you're going to have to move them along enough that they don't get in trouble with the people that are paying them and have, decision making things that get it, that affect their livelihood. But on the same token, you want to offer what you have. So you can't force it, but you say, look, here's another way. Tell me what you think. And most of the time, the coaches and the trainers who are really good, and they are going to be really good if they're at that level. The coaches and the trainers don't get there if they're not really good. They'll probably say, if that's what you need to do to get yourself ready, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah. So you mentioned in there, and I'm just kind of want to dive into it a little bit, that you would take stretching. I mean, and I guess this isn't in every situation, and every individual is kind of unique in the situation, but you suggested that one of the ways that you help someone in the process of warming up or recovering from injury or whatever that is that you're shifting them away from stretching as a support system into using awareness through movement based movements instead. So
yes,
could you maybe describe a little bit about why you would do that and why you see an advantage in a small awareness through movement lesson as opposed to stretching?
Wow, we might upset some of our viewers, but that's okay. I'm here offering another way. So my personal experience and my experience working with athletes is this, that they overuse themselves in a way that all they have left is willpower.
Mm-hmm.
And what did Moshe say? He said, willpower is the thing that you use when skill is no longer available, which I love that quote.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think if you can help them understand and we were talking about in warming up, that they're getting in their own way in this warm up of feeling how they can use their chest or their pelvis, whatever it is that they're bringing their attention to. And then if they can use that more dynamically so that it becomes more efficient and that they don't get in their own way, then they don't need to stretch because they have the great range of movement, even a greater range of movement with less effort. And then you kind of remind them, remember when when you have that less effort, that means everything's working harmoniously together and so forth and so on. And I want to clarify something, and I've said this other places when I've been, other training programs, other interviews, is I'm not talking about less effort in the fact that there's no effort.
Yeah.
I'm talking about less effort in the idea that the proportional amount of effort that you use has a feeling of lightness to it. It doesn't mean that there's no effort. Right. It means that the effort is proportional to the Moshe would talk about this, to the amount of muscle that an
action required
that is in the rest of the self. So the pelvis being the engine and the head being proprioceptive, taking in the telescope and so forth and so on. So it isn't that there's no effort. It is that the effort is distributed throughout oneself, so there's a feeling of ease and lightness.
Yeah, I think
and that's what they developed when they talked to you earlier. They say, well, it's not hard when you do it really, really well.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what you feel. So I really want to make that clear, right?
Yeah.
It's not that there's no effort.
Yeah.
It's quite different.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because perhaps the perception of the Feldenkrais method as being this kind of like slow meditative experience, you wouldn't necessarily correlate it with someone that wants to do like extreme sports or extreme performance of whatever skill they're doing. You can't necessarily tie those two things together. But from that perspective, where you're looking for this sort of like overall ease of being to get to the highest skill level, then I think it's a really nice way of framing what Feldenkrais can offer those people.
And you should be able to do both.
Yeah,
you should be able to be in a meditative place and a violent place, as Moshe would say, right? I mean, you should be able to choose.
Yeah,
and that's what Moshe was trying to say to people, is that you really, to be able to choose which way is most appropriate is what we're trying to do. So to circle back to the injury, is that if a person's warming up and they feel how they're using themselves when they're doing the ATM, mini ATM, then when they're out running or they're out pitching or whatever it is that the activity is, then they can call upon that in the middle of that. And one of the quotes that a track and field elite athlete that I worked with gave me was that she said, my coaches told me that all I needed to do was dig deeper. Kind of shook my head. And she goes, the Feldenkrais method gave me more places to dig.
Okay.
So, right. And so if it's this idea of, well, I just have to try harder. Well, where are you going to try harder? I mean, what parts of yourself, if you haven't done that little ATM prior to, you can't feel what parts you're not using and what parts you're getting in your own way. So I think that's the reason. I don't think stretching does that. Now, I'm not an expert on stretching.
Yeah.
for lots of different reasons. But I don't think that that's the essence of stretching.
Yeah. And I think
that
that's
knowledge.
particularly relevant within the context of overuse,
Right.
because
And injury.
often that is the state that they're used to being in,
Right.
And so one of the
Right.
things that you're doing is you're helping them come out of overusing themselves,
Right. And helping them figure out how they overuse themselves. It's
Yeah,
just not,
exactly.
that's a really big thing when you're working with an athlete is,
Yeah.
how are you doing this?
Yeah.
What is it you feel? Where do you feel that effort?
Yeah.
And as I said about the NFL player, he got it. I mean, he really said, oh yeah, I can really feel this and this and this. He makes the adjustments.
Yeah.
Not me anymore. I only see him irregularly, but he totally gets it. So
Yeah.
that was really
Great.
cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, that actually, I think, kind of summarizes in a really kind of succinct way how the Feldenkrais method can help someone that is a high performing athlete, or into sports performance in some way, or just using themselves in kind of strong ways. You've made it relatively clear how the Feldenkrais method can be useful. I don't know at this point, is there anything else that you would want to add to that subject that you think is kind of relevant to people that maybe are interested in getting better at what they do?
I think,
or struggling with what they're doing in some way through persistent injury, or running into a roadblock of performance, for example.
well, go see a Feldenkrais practitioner. I think there's something that is very relevant that practitioners should know, and the student client should know also, and it works hand in hand. And this is one of the things that I said to the baseball coach. As a practitioner, I'm not the recipe. Right? I'm not the person throwing the pitch. I'm not the person hitting the golf ball. All right. I'm just an ingredient in that recipe. Right. And to be respectful of that idea that you're going to add a little bit. I don't need the accolade. They're nice. And I take the bouquet of roses and I'm grateful for them. But it's about that person and how that person gets better, improves. And that's really important, for practitioners hearing this, and for people who are going to seek a practitioner. You can kind of remind them of that, and I've been guilty of that in my younger days, and sometimes even now. So it can happen, have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. And I guess that's part of helping, like the phrase you use is, I want to be your last teacher. In some way, it's like helping them see that they have all the resources they need within themselves. But sometimes what we can offer as a Feldenkrais practitioner is, I don't know, a new way of accessing that part of themselves, or themselves.
I agree. I don't think you can say it any better than that. I think that and it's a continuous process of self-discovery. It isn't like you get there. It isn't like the football player gets to the event that he's doing and says, okay, I got it now. It's like it's a dynamic thing that's constantly moving forward, and you have to pay attention, or somebody else and especially in the elite world, somebody else is going to take that job from you, and pretty quickly.
Great. I mean, is there anything? I think we've covered quite a lot, but is there anything that you would want to say in terms of, like, how can someone achieve peak performance in themselves? Maybe that's a nice question to it.
I think somebody can go in the direction of that. I don't think anybody gets there.
Right.
I don't think there's that perfection isn't there. It doesn't. But you can continually improve. I I think it's important, and this is more for practitioners to understand a little bit of what they might run into if they want to work with a team or a player or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for that practitioners to hear this, that when I worked with the Arizona State University team the very first time, I got rejected, I don't know, more than 6 or 8 times. I mean, my daughter, when she was younger, played baseball with the boys, right? And she went to the boys' baseball camps,
Mm-hmm.
and the head coach who was running that was an alum from Arizona State University, and his son was then playing for Arizona State.
Okay.
And we got to talking, and when I was picking up my daughter, and he sent his son to me.
Okay.
Now that player got better right away, right?
Yeah.
And from there, I was only introduced to the head coach.
Mm.
And it took more than 6 or 8 times for the head coach just to finally come up for one lesson.
Mm.
And I think it's really important for practitioners to understand that this other ear that you're trying to get them to listen to, when you get that opportunity, you really have to show up. You really have to say, I'm going to give this a personal lesson that they're going to be able to feel a difference that will benefit them.
Yeah.
Because they're really busy and they have 100 people trying to do the same thing. So if you get that window, that door to walk through, make sure that you have maybe 1, maybe 2 opportunities for that. And so make sure you put your toes on the line with them, so they understand. Yeah, I'm going to show you how different this can be and how it can benefit you. Otherwise, why do they have to listen to you? I mean,
Yeah.
they don't.
I think,
they got.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of like from the other side of the coin, the person that maybe is in that world and is seeking out a Feldenkrais practitioner, that like you say, the windows for them in terms of all the noise that they've got going on and all of the different opinions, the windows might be small where they would consider coming to a Feldenkrais practitioner. And
Right.
From that perspective, it's, like you're saying, it's important for them to at least have the experience that something could be easier or more effortless in some way in their own experience of themselves,
Yeah, and that in and of itself, when I first started doing this work, I used to say, okay, I know this is going to work because Moshe was so brilliant that I'll just do what he did. And it was the very, very beginning of things. And it did, and it worked, and people felt bad. I didn't know why at the time. I mean, I was just, my own process of learning.
Yeah.
But, it will work. Just practitioners, go ahead and do that. Put your toes on the line. You know what you're doing. Just give them a lesson, and they'll, and then explain it later on.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rich.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I mean, yeah. One last thing. I would say to general public who's listening to this, you don't have to understand right away how it's happening.
Right.
You just need to give it an opportunity.
Yeah.
So you can notice the differences, because the differences that make a difference is where the value is. And that's what we're trying to give you.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Nice way to sum up. Rich, where can people reach you if they're interested in what you do?
I'm on the web at the Feldenkrais Institute of Arizona, and I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. You can get me at R as in Richard, S as in Stephen, Goldsand, like the color gold and stuff on the beach, sand, at gmail.com.
Okay, we'll
And I'm
put all the
happy to.
links up for you. Don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah. And and yeah, I love talking with people. So don't be bashful.
And you available for private practice currently?
I'm available. I'm wonderfully busy, but I'm happy to. I'm working. I'm working with a tennis player in Germany. Excuse me, tennis player in Germany. I'm working with a martial artist in Australia. I just got through working 2 years, almost 2 years, in Japan via Zoom. So I'm doing that via Zoom, but yeah, wish we had more time to talk, but I'm doing some work with biotensegrity and the Feldenkrais work and how I find that interaction. So
maybe that's another conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much, Rich. I appreciate you coming on to talk to us.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks.